everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I got a question from a viewer recently regarding the first topwater bait that you should throw in the springtime. And I thought it was a good topic, so I thought I'd address it with you guys. You know, I've got my topwater box right here, overflowing with lots of different baits. But one of the main sections, these two up here, are pretty much full of prop style baits. These to me are some of the absolute best topwater baits to throw early in the year. There's a couple of reasons for that. And for those of you who are not familiar with a prop style bait, I'm talking about something like this guy right here. This is the old Smithwick Devil Horse, kind of one of the originals. But you're talking about a bait that's got at least one prop generally in the back, but also a prop in the front. So some of my favorites to throw, the Smithwick Devil Horse. But I will say one thing I like to do with these, and this is one I haven't modified, I actually like to unscrew the hook hanger and insert a split ring. That gives you a little bit more room, because right now the way the hooks are on there, you cannot turn the hook much, which therefore means the fish can get a lot of leverage, which then helps them get the bait unhooked. So from that standpoint, I like to either add a split ring, or I'll actually cut the hook off and then tie on a soft split ring with a what I would consider a higher quality treble hook, because this is an old school one right here, so I like to replace some of that. But the old Devil Horse is a great one. You guys know how much I love the Berkeley Spin Rocket. One of the keys to the Spin Rocket are that the blades are made of plastic, and therefore they don't give off much flash. So for me, if I'm fishing a sunny day and this is the bait I'm throwing, or the style of bait that I'm throwing, I'm going with the Spin Rocket 100% of the time, because I actually don't want that additional flash coming off the sun. And these clear blades don't give off that additional sparkle and that flash, which I actually think sometimes can be a deterrent. It actually can spook the fish and push them away. Another good one is the X Prop by Rapala. These can be really good baits as well. And then lastly, if I'm looking to cover a little bit of water, I've got the old Bagley Bangalore. So this has got a bill on it with a single prop in the back. So this, you can slow retrieve it almost like a wake bait. You can twitch it, you can kind of jerk it to get it to dive a little bit. But these things can be absolute killers as well. But the point here is that your prop style baits are excellent, excellent baits to throw during the early part of the year. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, generally speaking, when you start talking about water temperatures that are reaching, you know, they're rising, let's just put it that way, rising on the main lake. So maybe you got 48-degree temps that are rising slowly to 50 degrees. A lot of your really shallow backwater areas, or backs of pockets, backs of creek arms, those could be 10 degrees warmer. And when that happens, you get a lot of fish that will move up into some of that shallow, shallow water. And when that happens, they're not generally roaming. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're relating to objects that are going to absorb heat and produce heat. So your lay down trees, your dock posts, maybe a big isolated rock. And when you have an object that is holding a fish, a prop style bait like the Spin Rocket here is one of the best baits to entice them to bite. Now, a lot of these fish aren't necessarily very aggressive. They're not actively feeding. They're truly looking to warm themselves, which is bringing up their overall body temperature. Fish are cold-blooded creatures, so the warmer they are, generally the more active they are, because they need to feed their metabolism. But when the water is cold, they don't really need to do that so much. So a lot of times what you'll get is fish that are just sunning themselves or close to objects trying to absorb heat. Now, a lot of times if you were to throw a faster moving bait past those fish, they're not going to commit to it. They're not going to chase it because they're really not actively feeding. But a prop style bait like this is one of the best baits that will trigger those lethargic fish into eating. And a big part of that is you can throw this by that stump or that lay down tree, twitch it, and let the bait sit there. It presents an extremely easy meal for those fish that were not aggressive, that can trigger them into creating a reaction strike or looking at that object and saying that's an easy meal. They're going to expel a little bit of energy because they think it's a dying bait fish. They think it's something that is just fluttering around on the surface. And from that standpoint, they will commit to it. And it's funny because a lot of times, even though these can be generally bigger baits, a lot of times the way they bite it are not extremely aggressive. A lot of times what you'll see is almost like a swirl underneath the bait and it just disappears. Or if you've got a bait with a feathered treble hook on it, sometimes they'll just grab that treble hook and pull it under. It's really interesting to me. There are definitely times they will explode on it and scare the bejesus out of you, but there's also a lot of times where if you're not watching, you don't even know that you had a bite. And that's because that bait is sitting above those fish and they don't have to come far for it and they don't think they need to come at it with crazy force to eat it or come at it with such speed because they think it's alive. They think it's just something dying there and they're going up and they're just slurping the bait off the surface. But when you're talking about water temps that are reaching that 50-degree mark on like the main body of water and your backs to the pockets might be 55 degrees, absolutely a time to pick these up. They really do well throughout the year, but they excel from that early pre-spawn phase all the way through the spawn. And the reason they're so good during the spawn is because once fish have spawned and they start guarding their fry, there is nothing better than these little props to create a really good imitation of the fry themselves, like scurrying around the surface. If you've ever seen a fry ball, a lot of times they'll just kind of skitter and pop as one little mass. So this does a really good job of replicating that, but it also does a really good job of making the bass think that your bait is feeding on those fry. So you get a lot of really aggressive strikes from the fish at that point too. But for me, man, this is one of those baits. And if you want to see it in action, you can go back and watch my Lake Okeechobee event from last year. I'll tag that at the end of this video. You can see me catch some really nice fish on this bait. You can watch me fish it. You can see how I'm fishing it. But you gotta have your prop baits like this in the early part of the year. Just an absolute blast to fish. One of my favorite topwater baits, which is why I've got probably 20 of them in my box that I bring with me in the tournaments. Just a really fun way to fish. This guy right here, I'll put links for these baits to Tackle Warehouse if you want to check them out in the video description as well. Otherwise, guys, the first topwater I'm throwing early season is a prop style bait. What about you guys? Put it up in the comment section. I'd love to know what you guys are starting because we're really not that far away. There are a lot of lakes down south where you're starting to have some fish get into that pre-spawn phase. So don't forget about your topwater baits. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.